You look to be muted.
There it is.
Yes, sir.
You got me now. Well, welcome to Thursday Night Sauce. I thought I had the timing right on it that time, but played the intro, seemed to work pretty good. So it looks like a beautiful day in North Carolina.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. How's Leroy doing? You heard anything else today?
I saw a Facebook post a few minutes ago that everything went real well.
Yeah, I saw that one. I was wondering if you'd heard anything different.
No, nothing more.
Yeah, he told me he was going in, I think, the ninth or something, so they moved it up some.
Yeah, maybe.
But, I'm glad he's doing good. He's a pretty strong fella, so a lot of prayers. So hopefully things go well. Warren, you doing all right?
Doing well.
What
Can't
what what
complain.
what have you been doing? Anything?
Just catching up on work from being on vacation out in the woods in Virginia. Yeah, just getting some AC units and stuff squared away at the church, that sort of thing. But yeah, not too much. Still working on some module stuff presentation wise, but
Yeah,
yeah,
very good, very good. Did that video come through on the intro? Did you hear the sound on it?
I did not hear the sound on the intro.
But it
No,
played
I didn't
played the
either.
video, but it didn't have it on, huh? Yeah, figures. I don't know. I didn't have something set right, I guess. I've got the other format set up. I think it should work. Now, when you guys talk, it should put you over in the little thing. Say something, Keith.
Yeah, good evening.
Yeah,
Yeah, it worked out pretty good.
yeah, it shows up there now. I'm about getting the bugs out of this thing if I can just get the intro down now. But I have to run it through a different thing. So, but anyway, it works pretty good. But I had about so far I think about 7 hours going through the videos from up there, and it's gone pretty good. I've cut out a lot of the dead space. I hope to get it ready. I'm gonna try to send out something, maybe get us together. What is it? A week from next Tuesday, which would be what? That would be the 14th.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to set up a meeting for the 14th if y'all want to pencil it in. I'm not sure about it yet, but it looks like I got Hunt coming up from Mississippi, and because he did get a chance to come to Virginia, so I want to meet with him. He's on his way to Maine, I think, on vacation, so he's going to drop by. And Chris, I think, is down in Orange Beach or somewhere. He uh, he finished up with EMC down at Baldwin today, and so I don't know. I thought he was headed home, but I guess he decided to go to the beach, so he's
Might
he's
as well.
he's down there. No reason not to, I don't guess.
Yeah.
I think he's around home next week, so and I haven't heard from anybody else. Talked to Marty a little bit today, and so that's kind of it. I put this out on the all the social medias today, hoping we get somebody to sign in on uh, on the Zoom direct, and I haven't. I saw two people clocked in earlier today, but I don't see them now. But it's quite interesting. So I haven't talked to you. I talked to Keith the other day. I haven't talked to you, Warren. Tell me what you thought about the weekend. What did you think? Thought of anything new? I know we talked on the way back.
Yeah. No, nothing too crazy new. I think it was really well done. I really enjoyed it. Big thing for me was just kind of affirmation that we're heading in the right direction with our training and everything like that. I had a good idea going into it, kind of what I thought the training should be, and so this really helped bolster some of those ideas, and also add some new things in from what we previously had. So I really enjoyed that. Like I said, I really enjoyed getting to just work with a bunch of other guys that have been doing this for a long time and have a lot of knowledge and everything. I really enjoyed the constructive criticism and the constructive feedback and encouragement throughout the whole thing. The competition was really well done, and kind of brought everything together. So yeah, the only thing I could think I would add to it, which is not really a huge addition, but going into it, I thought maybe we would, I guess, share a module, kind of like Chris was up at the front of the room, and do some of the classroom portion of it. But other than that, I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you, Tim, for putting up with us for 3 days. That can be a chore in and of itself.
Well, it was kind of, I was telling Keith the other day and then Marty, but it's kind of Chris's show there because he had set that up for the storm sawing workshop. So it kind of made it where we come in. So I said, well, we do it if we do a competition. At least we can watch everybody under pressure and see how they work. And I think it went good.
It did.
So yeah, it's. I hope that we get some more time to be able to do some things on presentations, whether on Zoom or whether it's we're able to meet again. And you guys can kind of swap areas too now and find out who's close to who and go and play with it. It's like
Yeah,
the whole time we went through this thing is talking about it's your program. Hopefully, you've given some things to think about and some format to approach, but now you got to take that and more or less present it, practice it, and I think I mentioned this to, I don't know if I mentioned this year or not to this group, but last year I mentioned I spent a lot of time years ago in front of a video camera just doing presentations, and then when I started getting a chance to get out there and do them, it it took 15 or 20 of them before you start getting kind of comfortable with it. And so it just takes time, but and it works a little bit, it works a little bit slow in some cases because you got to have different scenarios and different situations and different trees and different props, and look at how things can be formulated with different groups, and cover the basics, but a lot of the stories and a lot of the things you'll be able to work with is going to be a little bit different. So that's just kind of how it works out. It takes time. As I always say, if we could do it all in a short order, we'd finish kindergarten and first grade, be ready for a family and start a business, right?
that's right.
Mhm.
So I
Did
guess
you
Yeah.
I say that about 10 times a week or so.
did, did you have an opportunity yet to talk to the gyms about the program? I'm kind of curious, since they were kind of part of the storm sawing portion of it, but also getting kind of introduced to this legacy thing. I was kind of curious if you had talked to them and got their perspective on the whole thing.
Well, GYM, I haven't spoken to since Saturday when we were there, but he wants to enroll in the next um, legacy so that he goes through the whole thing. I think he did an excellent job with what he picked up. It'd been about 4 weeks or so since he'd gone through the program with Chris in Richmond. He retained a lot of it. He had a lot of good. He picked up a few more things, repeating things, and y'all helped him with that. The different conversations and different shows that went on, showings, I guess you'd say, went on as far as you doing the competition events, and as we talked through things, it really helped out. But GIM, he sent me a message, and I've got some things to forward to you guys, but I haven't copied it over yet. But he went and met. I think yesterday was the day or the day before. It might have been Tuesday. He was meeting with the Forest Service on presenting to them what he can do to be able to set up the training program for the rivers. And he had pictures of and this is what he wanted me to send out, and I haven't yet. He had the pictures of a guy went in and took that. I think he showed you all the picture of the log that was down that one ravine.
Hmm.
And it's pretty deep water in there. That guy went in and he hung off a tree or something up above it and went down and cut it out. He was, I guess, a arborist or something from the area that kind of volunteered his time to go in there. But they got that big log out of that ravine. But he put together a pretty neat proposal, going back to for the Forest Service meeting. So I haven't heard back from him. He may log on here tonight, so we'll find out a little bit. But it went, really well with him. He said he picked up a lot of stuff, got some new ideas, and so that's a plus right there. And I spoke to Marty today, and he had a good trip back. It took him 2 days to get back, and he went down through with him some different things, his tree and how things went. He wanted to kind of discuss those things, and I think I told him, I said everybody did a pretty doggone good job on the big trees for sure, and they weren't big. That's what made them tough, but looking at some different things looking through the video is the real advantage when you get in trees that size on small diameters to think about your hinge depth, into the tree. That we talk about 80% of the diameter, and I think that's what kind of got John on his. If I really started looking at it, he was in pretty close to halfway. He was over a third anyway, and so that wedge going in the back, and then when he cut the holding fibers out there on the back, the strap in the back there, that thing set down, and you could watch the wedge come up like this.
Mm-hmm.
It pushed it down into it, and I got thinking, was it really bad fiber? Not really, although they were very slow growth Virginia pines, but it was just the sheer pressure of an 85-foot tall tree with about less than 6 inches over to that back corner, and it just pushed that wedge down into the fiber and split it apart. And once the top touched, it was kind of a done deal. But I thought that his question, anything else to do? What do you recommend? I said, let's make a plan. And he went back through the 5 steps, and we decided to pull the rope and throw line out. And I think Keith put the throw line up there in one throw, didn't you? Who threw that throw line?
Yeah, close to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see anybody pull it out again, so it went up there about over halfway the first time, and then we got the rope on that, and naturally with the machine it wasn't much. I wanted to try to use some man force there and see how much it take, because sometimes you don't have a machine, so you tie off to another solid object and pull down or sideways on the rope, see what kind of tension. I wanted to see how many men it would take to pull that back out, because I bet you it had good 15 foot of back lean, and it was already kind of hung in that other tree back there too. So that was a pretty good lift there, but it didn't take much for that track steer to move it. That's for sure.
No, that thing didn't even know it was on the other end.
It's a beautiful thing.
But the real key there is the hinge.
Mm-hmm.
If we'd have been probably the same situation, I don't know, sometimes a little bit thicker hinge gives a little bit more support, but he had a good 1.25 inches, I think we saw on there. So his hinge was perfect what he planned. But if he would have had the ability to start in on the back, that just a couple more inches there, start in on the back and put a wedge in from the back, I don't think he'd have had any better success. I don't think he could have lifted that with that, because that would have been a pretty heavy situation right at that. If he had went straight through possibly and put the wedge in sideways way back to the back, might have got a solid bite, but I don't know. That's with the hinge back that far. I don't know how many tons of pressure that would be. You're the engineer, Warren. How many tons of pressure would that be on that particular spot? So it's
I
kind
mean, Keith and I could probably figure it out.
of
I mean, that's a huge lever arm. Um, on that small contact point where that wedge is. So yeah, it was kind of, even just by looking at it, I think we all kind of had the same idea what the outcome was going to be as far as being able to straighten it up with just a wedge.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
uh, I'm always leery of little trees like that with a wedge if it gets too close to the hinge, because then the hinge is acting like a fulcrum on the fibers, and it's trying to, if it is a back leaner, it's leveraging those fibers. It's trying to pull them up. If it's right nestled right up against the hinge, and he had it, back a good bit. And I think that's definitely a saving grace that that made a big difference. And even putting the other two wedges in there, um, it was kind of interesting to see that it was literally this much on each side, holding that entire tree up, and kind of demonstrated how those outer rings, how much stronger that fibrous, that flexible material is than that middle section where the plunge went through. And I thought that was a great example in and of itself, just seeing the hinge dynamics right there, and showing how strong a hinge is, just so much stronger than what people think.
yeah. I was telling Marty today too. One technique that I use quite often on small ones like that, uh, because you want to have enough strap there to support the weight in the back. And so basically what I do is I bore all the way through, set the hinge up, and then maybe cut back a little bit according to the diameter, but then pull your saw back out halfway and then go straight out the back. And what that does is that gives you the ability to get that wedge all the way back there, but you've got a good corner there to support the weight until you
Hmm.
take it out. And then you don't have to cut into the hinge, into the wedge either, because you can, when you cut out, you just move it over 3/8 of an inch and you got plenty of room to cut it out level. And that gives you a good solid perch. And then if you need to, you can then be able to put another wedge in to the side. But like on two or three of them that I've been looking at the video so far, um, the the wedges, because they're small, people putting the wedges in right behind the hinge, and you don't get a whole lot of lift right there. So you gotta get it back to the back. So those 10-inch trees are some of the toughest ones there. And a lot of people, they'll use push poles with that or go ahead and place a rope. But it's pretty confident in most cases with me. I feel like if I can get a decent hinge on there, I can generally get it over. Or maybe do what we attempted to do was a small back leaner technique. Go ahead and put the face notch in, bore through the front twice because of the lean on that tree, and then set two wedges, then cut the bad side and the good side just under the edge. And then that gives you a real solid center of the tree to actually lift it. And that generally on a tree like that, it works pretty good. I haven't had too many fail at that point unless it's rotted or something. But it lifts up there pretty good. But then too, I was just thinking about something else on that is, um, oh, he was saying there was 16 inches or so of back lean, and I don't know, he might have been looking at another adjacent tree there, but look like from what I could tell, it is a good 4 foot of back lean on that one. So, and then it went back to 15, so it was quite a feat after it did sit back, but safely got it over. All we had to do was just stop and go to Plan B and work it out of there. So
Yeah,
it's
and I
good.
love John's attitude about everything too. You know, calm, excuse me, calm, collected still, and just didn't let it get to him.
Yeah. Well,
That
there's
was good.
no reason to. Once you make the decision to start it, then you know, there's no reason to be upset with how it goes because you got a choice. You know, once you put together the plan, you've got a choice to walk away from it or do it a different way before you start. But once you start, you know, that's it. But in that case, we didn't have too much to worry about wherever it went, as long as everybody gets out of the way. But that hinge did a good job. And then spring poles. I was surprised. Everybody was pretty close on the spring poles. And
I
Chris,
wasn't.
huh?
I wasn't. I was 4 inches off.
You had 4 inches. I mean, that's still pretty close on a spring pole. A lot of those, Chris had been over there, two of them, and it was a double bend on one of them there. It might have been yours, Keith. And that's a tough one to calculate when it has kind of a double bubble to it. But yeah, I think about 5 inches was about the farthest that we had off on that. So, and that's something that's kind of, there's a little bit of skill there, but it's a lot of guess too. It's according to how it is. I always say if I can be within about 10 inches on it and be at the 45 to the rear, I'm in pretty good shape. So that generally gets you out of any trouble situation. So
Every one of those little spring poles was under a good amount of tension. I mean, with standing on it, and they were climbing the tree to lean on it to get it to bend over, and not one of them went wild or crazy. Just a little slide notch and tap it on the back, and it just fell apart, and very anticlimactic. And I've heard that's good tree work.
hmm yeah, yeah. I found well, there's Lee Dawkins. You checking in, Lee? Maybe so. You're muted.
Yes, sir.
There he is. What's happening, Lee?
Not too much. Just taking her easy this evening. You?
Oh, we've kind of been chatting about we had a good get together up in Virginia, and had, I guess, it was total of 12. Was it 12 of us?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so we had a little competition of the Forest Apps instructors up there from the Legacy program. So it went pretty good. We were just talking about some of the different competition things.
You you probably have some real aces in the group, don't you?
Well, there was one of them that I think he racked about $300 and a big tooth from Warren, so he did pretty good. And second place got a nice pole pruner. It went pretty good. Oh, we just had a fun with it. That was part of what I had on the first year was a little bit of a rebate deal for the first five that signed up, trying to get it going, and so I paid that off, and two of the guys couldn't make it, so I said, well, we'll make it for everybody. So we took the rest of the pot and applied it to first place. So they had a good time with it. So
Yeah. Sounds fun.
had a bunch of good scores.
And he's a great sport. He ended up buying our lunch. Use that money to take care of us.
I think I got a dinner and a lunch. I'll eat like a bunch of hogs. I don't know what it is. A bunch of food was eaten. I know that.
No doubt.
But we had a couple guys that kind of do what you do, Lee. We had one of the parks guys from Richmond that does a lot in invasive species and cleaning out stuff and cleaning up storm stuff too. And then we had another guy from North Carolina. He's originally from Michigan, and he's in North Carolina working to clean up some rivers like the Natatahala and all of that. And so he's cutting jams in the water, and I guess invasive species along the side and all kind of stuff. Working some different projects for the rafting companies and stuff.
Yeah, I saw your video about the man that was trying to improve the fishing streams.
Yeah.
And that sounds like it could get a little haywire.
Yeah. Yeah, that see, what was you talking about, the old Sam one or the
You
store?
were talking. You're talking about the that fellow that was wading in the wading in streams with a
Oh,
chainsaw.
yeah, that was last week off of Thursday night, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was on our week before. Yeah, I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, he does that quite a lot, evidently. Has been past year or two. You cut any invasive species? What have you cleaned up lately?
No, I finished up before the copperheads came out and the ticks and all that. So
Well, we had plenty of ticks. I ended up with about 3 this week from the weekend. I don't know if y'all found any or not, but I had one. I didn't find them Monday evening. Little bitty guys. Yeah, they're out. We didn't see a single snake though.
Mm-mm.
So I guess that Virginia don't tread on me thing holds true. They're gone. You know.
I did learn how to run a Husqvarna
Oh, did you see the
over.
video I did on that?
Yeah,
Huh?
I did.
I tried my best not to make you look bad, but I don't know.
No, no, it was good. It was good. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was the first time I ever ran a Husky, which is, I know, super surprising. I probably should have ran one by now, but that's just the way the cards fell. But no, I mean, it was really informative. I think it'll help somebody out, and I'm glad to have been the person to showcase that.
I'm glad too. I'm glad too. You handled it pretty well. Did you see that, uh, Keith? Did you see the video?
No, was it Warren? There were two others that also had trouble, and
Yeah. Well,
old Chris comes over and pulls on it one time, and it fires right up. I thought that
I've
was pretty comical.
I've done that many times. I put out the video. I said it's magic. But I do that all the time with the city and county guys. They'll get the saw flooded, and they pull and pull and pull, or it's cold. And they pull and pull and pull till it is flooded. And I go up there. I keep telling them. I said, go all the way down the choke, come up one notch, then pull, and they'll start messing with it, and then it won't work. I go all the way down, pull back up, because I see them hit the throttle, and that's what Warren did. He hit the throttle on it, and that takes it off. But what happened on him was when I looked at the video, um, was when Bo shut the saw off, he choked it down,
Uh,
and
yeah.
then Warren had the pleasant surprise there of Chris saying, "Well, it's ready to go," but it wasn't ready to go, was it? It was flooded.
It's not.
And
Yeah, I
then
think he had the same idea. Or same issue I did was, that's the way obviously you turn off a steel. So he just bumped it up, and yeah, the
yeah,
rest was history.
yeah, yeah. That's what happened. It was used to shutting it off with the up button, but
Good
nothing
time.
wrong with that. I have the same problem when I switch from one to the other, from this event to that event. I'll sit there and forget to turn it on or something. But that is one nice thing on the Husqvarna is you don't have an off position once you start it up there on those new ones. They're always ready to go. You just pull the rope. But yeah, he flooded it down, and I think I counted 11 times you pulled through that even made it worse. And it sounded like at one time, the second time it might fire, but you had it flooded good then. And so Chris, if you noticed on the video when he did it, he didn't put his hand down in the handle.
Yeah.
He is basically he had his hand up on it and worked the button. And then if you put it in that fast idle, you may have to pull it twice or 3 times, but most of the time, first pull, it'll clear it right out. I don't know why it does that. I don't know whether the engineers actually engineered it that way or not, but I was told that what happens is that when you even on the new saws with the small crankcases and high compression, is that when you open the throttle up, it just kind of swirls through. And in some cases, you'll even pull more fuel in that way because it's pulling from the the high speed nozzle in some cases, and so whatever fuel's in the metering side. And if you in that fast idle position, you're just opening it not to really pull from the carburetor. you're just pulling from the air. The air's coming through and pulling with what fuel you have in the crankcase, and so it cleans it out a lot faster than sometimes on those saws. If you open them wide open, it just swirls. So I found it to work pretty good on all brands. It really does good. And on the larger Huskies, it's really easy. You just pull the blue button out, push it back in. You're in fast idle. And so I won't show guys that sometimes until after I started. What'd you do? So I said it's magic. I always say that. But yeah, it wears out a lot of ropes and arms, I tell you, when people get them flooded. And when you're working in a crew, out there with a lot of cities and towns, they don't know whether the saw is really warm or not. It's a hot day out there, and somebody might have picked it up and used it or whatever. And then if you don't, I've gotten a habit. I'll go to fast idle immediately. If I think the saw's been running all that day on a warm day, especially, and go right to the fast idle. Put the choke on, go to fast idle, pull it through. If it doesn't start then you just simply choke it and pull till it pops one time, then you're ready to go. It saves a lot of rope pulling. So.
I'll say another thing I really liked about the program, and I'm definitely going to use this when we train our volunteers, is breaking people up into teams, kind of like a mock limbing and bucking situation, and then having them discuss on their own what they're going to do, and then each team watches the other team kind of go through their process and work through that and have comments on that. I think all of us seeing each other kind of go through that was really beneficial for me. I don't know about anybody else. I'm sure it was, but I really enjoyed that. I like to kind of watch how other people think, and work through situations. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I think a key there is I've used that now for several years. Well, we kind of did it with even the logger training years ago, is we would mark where we wanted it cut and that kind of stuff. And so even if it was individual, they'd go up and they had to put together the plan, talk to us, tell us what they're going to do in each cut, and then do it. But then when I started the storm stuff, and especially with the cities and towns, is I'll go in and crisscross the trees a little bit more than what we had them on the weekend. And really, you go in there once you do it a couple times, you can see where the pivots are, you can see where the movement potential is. And so I put a dot right there, and then you get 2 or 3 people in a crew, and that gets people talking together about what it is. And then it also helps people to kind of pay more attention, because you're not so nervous if you're in a group like that. You got some communication going on before you have to actually make the cuts, and it makes it pretty cool. But I still see a lot of people don't take the information and apply they give me the plan correct, but then they go and apply it wrong. And so everybody gets to kind of witness that and see how things work. And that's really how you learn on that. And like I told Marty today, there's no way to know exactly what everything is going to do there, because it's impossible many times to see that it's going to go up or down or side to side. So, but after you take information several times, it gets better, but you're still going to have some that doesn't work as you think they would. But the more times you plan it, the easier it gets, and that's really the ticket to that. And sharing that information focused in on that particular pile, it helps you to see how things will work. And also then, and this is something we did with the logger training too, day 5 or end of day 4 and into day 5 with the equipment on the game of logging, we would take and actually set up patterns for trees to be felled. And that's the next thing. You're looking to reduce the accident and injury potential, but then on the next step to be able to put them in groups so that it's easy to buck the tops, and then it's also easy for the skidder or dozer or whatever to take care of them. And so that's the next step. So the next step with this is I suggest that you maybe don't throw the equipment in there to begin with. let's talk about just all I've got's a chainsaw and a wedge, and then the next step is to start applying how you can work and be more productive with the equipment, because if you try to put the equipment in there too quick, then you end up looking at how many horsepower you got there. You know what I mean? So you don't quite as much think about the different cuts in your plan. You just, oh, it'll break loose. I heard that a couple of times Saturday. It'll break loose. It'll break loose. But we couldn't do that with logging because you'd end up splitting fiber or something. Then you got an issue when that skidder grabs it and it's not completely cut. It's going to peel something. But that's a good thing to do, especially with the disaster groups and volunteers. And then Keith was talking about, and I think it's a good idea, is the next step then, and Warren, you've been doing some of that, is getting into the ropes and rigging, so they understand tied in with the other equipment, and also as a step in between is rigging and knots and working some safety and pulling and stuff there. So, and Keith's got a lot of stuff on that he put together. They added. Keith? Did you know they at SP they added a section on the ropes and rigging stuff? Have you seen that?
I have not seen that. There's a guy named Phil Pavey in Canada, is a 40-year arborist.
Yeah, I
made his
met him
living.
down in Orlando. Yeah.
Okay, and I think he composed a lot of that. I had put a little bit of basic stuff about throw lines and running bow lines, and maybe another approach or two, but by and large, I think he somehow or another he got up with the right folks, and they listened and they incorporated a little bit. So I'd be real curious to see that myself.
It looked like your stuff. I think it was. I think Leroy and all, him and a couple others, I think, kind of added it in there. But, I don't know. It could have been. It could have been his, but I think it was some of the stuff you had worked on. I think you had sent me some of it one time, but it's not a whole
Yeah.
lot of difference there, is there? I mean, it's kind of
No.
like chainsaws. It's pretty much all the same, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah.
But at least you can feel good that they finally put it in the system, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a valuable thing to at least have in your arsenal, especially if there's a broken out top or a big huge dangling limb overhead, to be able to do that and be able to pull remotely, and do that safely. I think that's definitely worth investing in. But then how do you pull it? You can get in trouble, and actually had an opportunity to explore that a little more with just some of the math. And they always say the higher the better. Turns out that 45 degrees is kind of the optimal angle to pull a rope. But the problem with that is it puts you right in the SWAT zone. It doesn't matter how tall the tree is if you're pulling by hand. So then you've got to kind of work into your plan, where how am I going to remain safe? And you saw Chris. The very first thing he did is he went and got a block, and even though the machine was way off to the side, he put a redirect in, and that way it kept everybody safe. And I think that's the more poignant issue is just about anybody can do some pulling and figure out different ways to pull, but to do it safely and follow a plan that will keep everybody out of harm's way. I think that's the important part. So I'm encouraged to see that.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people that don't use a redirect. You try to go. I saw one just a few weeks ago where had it tied to a skid steer, a small stand-up skid steer.
Mhm.
Um, I guess most people think about at least 1.5 times the height of the tree. Actually, I think it's pretty much written and thought of as 2 times, because, and especially, if you're removing something that's not a real healthy tree, you have a greater chance of a top flipping out or breaking limbs out. I know I had one pine up in Pennsylvania a couple years ago that thing hit the ground and there was one limb come off of the top and it must have flew 70 yards down left, you know. And so
Yeah.
you want to try to make sure you're back from the whole canopy that's going to hit you, but you also got to think about flying objects after it hits the ground too. And so you got to have enough distance back. But I could see where I guess the 45 would be higher you go, really, the easier it'd be to obtain that 45, wouldn't it, back down to a redirect or straight pull.
Hmm. It's a real interesting curve. It looks like an airplane wing, the way the curve comes up and tells you, and it peaks right there at 45 degrees. I shared it with Warren. It's just like a little article that kind of put it into a PDF, but at 27 degrees with a 100-pound pull, you can get 4,000 pounds of pull. At 45 degrees, you only get 5,000 pounds, and it's kind of like you got to go way higher up on the tree to get that extra 1,000 pounds. And so I think that would be a real informative way to think about it, and that you're getting most of what you're going to get anyway, being a little lower, but by putting the rope lower, most tree guys work with ropes that are 150, 200 foot long, and on the East Coast, there's not many trees that are
Yeah.
over 100 foot, and so you're already right there at 1.5 with a 150-foot rope, and then you could add on or do a redirect. So yeah, I think it's very valuable to discuss that. But like you always say, you definitely got to get your plan squared away first, and hazards, obstacles. Think about, where's it going, where are you going, and the other factors that come in can get complicated quickly. You put a machine on there and pull too hard, now you're inducing barber chair for no reason whatsoever, and that's where the knowledge of a hinge and how to properly form a hinge. You put too thick of a hinge on there, you pull it with a machine, now it's splitting out. But if you've got the 10% hinge, all it's going to do is fold that hinge. And so I think that's just invaluable to know those basics, like you keep saying. If
Hmm.
you got your basics squared away and you got your folding um, all set up first, then you can add these other layers. But you have to go back to the basics.
Yeah, I see that quite often. We've talked about before that guys in larger trees where you don't necessarily have to bore them, is start cut from the back. You place your wedge in there, and I see this all the time at fires and those kinds of things where guys are a little bit sheepish, about shaking stuff and all. But if you just start in and place your wedge and you've got a hinge that's this thick, when you hit that wedge, the top really shakes. When you've
Yeah.
got the hinge down that's bendable, you get movement each time. And you get shaking some in the top, but usually it's going with what you want it to do. And I see that quite often where people will try to drive a wedge in with too much hinge and really work a lot harder than necessary, much harder than necessary. And then same thing with the rope. If you've got a real thick hinge there, the rope adds a lot. You could pull limbs out of the top or barber chair something. So setting up that hinge is important, which is easy to do. The tree that you'd be using a rope or a wedge with, because it'd be a back leaning tree, right? And so you're able to either bore it and set your wedge and then cut the strap, but you've already got your hinge established to what you want, which we talk about 10% or less. And then you do the same thing with a rope, because you're able to take a wedge and put in there, and just cut from the back. It's going to come back on the wedge. You got your rope already attached, and then you tip the tree with the rope. So, but in both of those cases, you've got the hinge set up, and the same thing should be with a piece of equipment pushing also. So that the important thing is to go back to those basics and get your plan and get your hinge established. Like people ask me, well, do you use a bore cut and everything? No, I don't use a bore cut and everything. I use it for one technique to be able to establish my hinge. If I can't outcut the tree movement up to a 10% or less hinge, then I'm taking a chance of barber chair or loss of control. And also, if I get in there and I've got bad wood or something, I might even lose everything. So I start to look at a heavy forward leaner or a leaner that I can't outcut up to my 10% hinge. I'm going to bore cut. if the weight's back, then I know automatic. That's no big deal at all. I just cut in any way I want to and place a wedge to support it until I'm ready to drive the wedge in or pull with a rope or push with a machine. But if I use a wedge, I don't always use a machine or a rope. But if I use a machine or a rope, I always use a wedge. That's kind of the thought process that I've always used. It works pretty decent. But that's true. I mean, you can get into some dangerous situations applying too much pressure on stuff. So I think that the way to look at that, what we have covered, you know, on the basics up to making sure the face notch is correct and the hinge is correct, and you established your escape route and your back cut plan, and I think that's the basics. And then you take and go to the rigging and machine and those kinds of things. That way you, because I mean, really, you know, some work okay, but really a rope doesn't really offer you too much in direction or safety if you don't have a hinge on there. I mean, if you take the hinge off of it, it can twist all over. I mean, you can take and put 3 lines up in there and pretty much be able to put it where you want it to go. But 1 line and a no hinge, you can be pretty bad shape on that.
All you can do is limit the motion and rotate it into something else instead of having it fall. And I've seen that before where somebody had tied something off and they got back behind the lean actually and cut it, and it went down and the hinge failed, and it actually swung the tree toward the rope because the rope held, and ended up pulling it into another tree and made a much bigger mess. They'd have been better off not even put a rope in it. They could have just, you know, trusted a hinge and let it go where it needed to go. But it's one of those things, some things you got to learn the hard way of whom I am chief. But it's you know, that's where your skill comes in and your experience. You figure that out. I thought over the weekend I was thinking about the you know, with the competition and setting the hinge up first, you have to call out your hinge. And I don't know if any, you know, not one of those trees that we cut other than maybe John's, would you have had to put a wedge in per se if you could have pulled them over or pushed them over or had any other number of methods. But I just think it was really valuable to have to call your hinge out and set that hinge. And then no matter whether you roping or pushing or wedging or whatever it was, then you kind of go back and do your forensics. And you can't do that with a lot of other approaches if you're not you know, establishing and thinking through your hinge first. And that is that most pivotal, literally, element in the felon plan. And so I was thinking about that is a huge value add to the module and the felon plan itself, if nothing else. Like you said, if you've done that with a standing tree, then when you go to the horizontals and you're trying to establish hinges, it gives you a little more confidence in what a hinge can or can't do.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, I use notches and hinges a lot more, you know, on horizontal stuff and limbs than I ever think about doing felling trees, because you just do a lot more cuts on a horizontal tree or limbs, you know, as you're taking the tops off. And
Yes, sir.
that's or if you're a climber or working out of a lift or whatever, it'd be the same thing. You're doing a lot more up there, and those same things play true, like we saw with the hangers, is that you cut the hinge off of it, you don't know which direction it's going to go. But with a hinge on there, you have the ability to kind of persuade the butt of the tree to go where you want it to go to maneuver your top.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a key, is understanding that it works good on limbs, on hangers, on lowering larger trunks, because just straight cuts end up having a lot of side to side pressures when that curve closes. So it's important to think about where you can use notches and hinges, and then if you're fairly low to the ground, you can use offsets pretty easy, or if you've got equipment that's going to be grabbing it, use offsets. Um, I generally, on the tongue and grooves, I generally put the bore cut in first, and then cut the compression side and then the tension side. And but Chris he has good success with what he's done with, you know, putting the 2 cuts and then the bore cut through. And as long as he's using a machine, so he's got enough offset there. a lot of times when I use that, I'm just, an inch or two of an offset. But it's, I do, if there's any chance or things are split, I'll put the bore cut in, place a wedge or a stick or something into the bore cut to keep it from closing. And then you got to think about your compression and tension side. But I have had some if you do the two outside cuts first, when you start the bore cut, you can get stuck pretty good and you have no way of putting anything back in that slot. But, it's when you get the feel for it and look at larger trees, it's no big issue. You got plenty there, but that's one technique too, as well as the offset. Just a simple offset is with when you got storm stuff that's shattered and twisted, because there, as Keith said and I mentioned too, is it's that fiber's trying to go back to its original position. And so if you got something that's all twisted or you got the hinges bent over, that kind of stuff, you have to identify that fiber bent over here like this is going this way and this is coming this way, and in between there you may have the weight that's grabbing your bar and chain. So you have to recognize how that untwists itself, as far as the fibers go. This is pretty interesting on some of it. But I think if you look at that, that's a pretty motley looking crew there.
Right, especially Sam's mustache.
Yeah, they did. Everybody did
That's the only classy part.
did a super job.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a great time together for sure.
And I was just amazed that I showed some of this last Thursday night. Going around and learning a little bit of history at the God's Pit Crew, and it's amazing how they have organized this stuff and the ability to put it all together. So it's pretty neat, pretty neat. Well, gentlemen, I don't see a whole lot happening tonight. We got several people watching, but I don't see any questions. Anybody have any questions out there?
Hey, Tim, I have a question.
Yeah, Lee.
What do you suggest when you're going to winterize or mothball or put a saw away for a long time? Do you run them out of gas, or you leave them full of gas and start them frequently, or
Well,
how do you?
if I'm not using one, I generally sell it. No, just jokingly. Um, what I do is, and maybe Keith and Warren stores some up there, and Keith has done many times with the Samaritan's Purse. What I do is I will idle the fuel out of it, and I generally will pour the bar oil back in the container also, or either at least, if it's halfway down, you're okay. But bar oil will tend to siphon itself out sometimes in storage. But as far as the fuel, I just idle it out. I've been using the bottle gases, for several years, so they pretty much have some good stabilizer. Some people will use a Sta-Bil or something like that mixed with the fuel, and then idle that out, so you have, somewhat of a stabilizer in the fuel. But canned gases and mixes with stabilizer, and really, be truthful, most all of the new oil mixes with the major brands already has stabilizer in them. You can look on the bottle; it'll usually says contains stabilizer. So all you really need to do is just idle it out of the saw or the trimmer or whatever, and take everything out of the tank. You don't want to leave a lot in there, because any fuel is going to attract moisture out of the air. So if you leave it in there very long, it's gonna pick up moisture. And if you do leave the fuel in there, change it out, before you go to fresh fuel, before you start pulling on the rope when you get ready to use it again. What do you guys think, Warren?
No, that's great. I think a good example for us, we kind of migrated to all Mtronic or just the Pro line setup. And we have a couple of 271s that have sat for probably, gosh, probably 6 or 7 months now at this point. And did the same thing, dump the fuel out, idle it out, dump the bar oil out, and we just dump the fuel, funnel it back into one of our 50-to-1 cans.
Hmm.
And usually on our pro lineup, since they're always on the truck, or at least we like to have them prepped ready to use, just in case. We do go through and start them up, probably every 3 days or so, just to get them going. And those are the ones that we're ready to use if we need to right off the bat, kind of thing. So, but if they're gonna be sitting for an undetermined amount of time, we do exactly what you just said. I think it's good practice just to get the fuel out of there.
Keith, anything different? You
I
had
just take I
hundreds
just
of
take the back.
saws to do that with.
No. Well, they got used more often than you think, but my personal saws, I just take the battery out and put it on the shelf, and so that solves that. As far as my other personal gas saws, the only thing I've ever heard from anybody that's absolutely unanimous is to whatever you do, don't store it with ethanol in the fuel, and I think that's pretty well a known that it can really wreak havoc on your your flexibles in the both inside the carburetor as well as fuel lines and all. But personally, I've tried my best just to use a good high quality mix, and then no matter which saw I've got, I've got a big old 3120 that a buddy of mine sold to me dirt cheap years ago. I've used it probably 5 times total on tree jobs, but I'll go out and at least once every 6 months, try to do my best, 6 7 months, crank it up and run it, and it cycles whatever's been in there. But I think the best thing is to do like you say, Tim, is just if at all possible, just idle the fuel out, get it out of there, and doesn't matter what the fuel is. Then if you've got the majority of it out, then there's no interactions. Doesn't matter whether there's ethanol or not. At Samaritan's Purse, a lot of their saws, they would definitely use a canned fuel or something, absolutely, that had a stabilizer in it if they're going to put something on the shelf. And so we would put a little tag on the saw, and it would say GTG and then a date. And the idea is that GTG meant it's good to go. It's sharp. It's been gone through. Air filter's good. It's the reduced downtime modules essentially been worked through on that. It's good to go. All the safety components are in place, and then it's ready to take off the shelf and use. But by having the date on it, then that let everybody know too that if it's been there for a year, you can't have any confidence in what that gas is, and going in and out, everybody going different directions. Um, we try our best to make sure and go through the stock and fire them up when we could, but there was always one going to fall through the gaps, and I think it's invaluable to go ahead and just get that fuel out of them and store them empty, and then again, you ain't got to worry about it because it's there's nothing in there to worry about. So I think that's the best approach.
It's still good to start them up every once in a while. Put fuel in, start it up, and run it back out if you're still going to be storing it. But
Yeah,
because it can get kind of a
dried up.
varnish, the fuel when it finally evaporates out, it'll leave stuff, and that's where sometimes a stabilizer. But like I say, I don't know of too many oils out there nowadays for two cycle that doesn't have a stabilizer in it of some type. So you just have to check your oils, and that should do it. That answer
Say,
your question, Lee?
yeah, thank you, Tim and gentlemen. Say, Tim, is there anything to when you do mothball it or whatever to put your piston all the way up to top dead center, close off the ports? Does that do anything?
I don't think you're really going to close much off that way, but because you've always got either the intake or exhaust, that's probably going to be cracked some. But
Don't worry about piston position.
I would probably myself. I'd probably lean more towards air getting in there than to try to uh, close it off as far as that goes, and try to keep it in a fairly low humidity
Mhm.
storage spot if you can. But yeah, it's not a whole lot. I mean, if the exhaust is open, the intake's probably going to the crankcase. So any way you get it, it's going to get air in there. And I guess you know, storage wise is as low humidity, no moisture. Try to keep it as dry as possible. But I've had mold saws my dad had. I did a video on one of them on a that he and I kind of went in together with a Husqvarna 65. I think we bought it in 1981, and it was probably 1990 was probably the last time it was used, 91 maybe. And I poured, he left the fuel in there, and I poured that fuel out and put new fuel in there, and I pulled it about 5 times, and it started up, ran like a top. So I mean, you know, it's you keep it in someplace dry, it's not all that critical. But it had fuel in it, you know, from the 90s probably, or the end of the 80s. That's probably pretty good stuff at that time. Hard to say.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I think we've about slayed an hour here, so I appreciate everybody coming by. I was noticing that we got we got CC on Facebook. What do you call that? It's 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 reading our words here.
Oh, the closed
Closed
captions.
caption. Yeah, so we got all kinds of stuff going. So anyway, I appreciate y'all coming and dropping by. We're going to do it next Thursday night again. So if you get a chance, I'll send out another link and we'll make it happen again. But we had several hundred on both of the channels looking at it from the past couple of weeks. So yeah, they don't come on board. Maybe one day they will if we get enough people involved. But they do check it out and make comments and so I'm hoping that we're helping out some people out there. We'll see. But I appreciate y'all dropping by and we'll see you next week if not before. All right. Good sawing to you.
Good night, man.
See ya.
All right, thank you.
Good night.